John stood in the driveway of the house he'd just bought, keys heavy in his palm, and wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The Victorian sat crooked on its foundation, like a drunk leaning against a lamppost. Paint peeled from the siding in long, sad strips. 3 windows on the second floor were boarded up, and the porch sagged in the middle like a broken promise. But it was his, and right now, that was all that mattered. "Daddy, it looks like a haunted house," his daughter Helen said from the back seat, her voice small and uncertain. John turned to look at his 6-year-old through the car window. Her brown eyes were wide, her small, hands clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd carried everywhere since her mother died 2 years ago. "Maybe a little," John admitted, forcing a smile. "But we're going to fix it up. Make it beautiful again. Make it ours." The truth was, this falling-apart house in a quiet corner of Ashford was all John could afford after the medical bills, the funeral costs, and 2 years of barely holding himself together while raising Helen. Alone, his carpentry business had suffered when grief made his hands shake too much to measure straight. Lines, clients disappeared, bills piled up. This house was a fresh start, or maybe just a different kind of ending. He wasn't sure yet. The old man who'd sold him the house had been strange during closing. Arthur Brennan was his name. 83 years old, with hands that trembled when he signed the papers and eyes that seemed to look through John rather than at him. "You'll take care of her, won't you?" Arthur had asked, his voice cracking. "The house?" John had replied, "Yes, the house." Arthur had paused, then added quietly, "She's been good to me, kept my secrets, held my memories. She deserves someone who understands that houses aren't just wood and nails." John had nodded, unsure what else to say to a lonely old man saying goodbye to his home. But then, just as they were leaving the lawyer's office, Arthur had pressed something into John's hand, an envelope, yellowed and worn, sealed with red wax that had cracked with age. "Open this only when you're ready," Arthur had whispered. "You'll know when that is." John had wanted to ask what that meant, but Arthur was already shuffling away, his shoulders bent under the weight of whatever he was leaving behind. Now, standing in front of his new house with Helen beside him, John reached into his jacket pocket and felt the envelope still there. He'd almost opened it a dozen times over the past week, but something had stopped him each time, a feeling he couldn't name, a whisper that said, "Not yet." "Come on, sweetheart," John said, taking Helen's hand. "Let's go see our new home." The inside was worse than the outside. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like dark flowers. The hardwood floors were scratched and warped. The kitchen cabinets hung at odd angles, and when John turned on the faucet, the pipes groaned like something dying. But there was potential here. He could see it beneath the damage. The crown molding was original and beautiful. The fireplace in the living room was real marble. The staircase had a banister carved with intricate details, flowers and vines that must have taken someone months to complete. "Can I pick my room?" Helen asked, her voice echoing in the empty house. "Of course. Go explore. Just be careful on the stairs." John watched his daughter climb to the second floor, her small footsteps careful and deliberate. She'd been so careful about everything since Sarah died. Careful with her words. Careful with her laughter. Careful not to ask for too much, as if she was afraid that needing anything might break her father. Completely, it was breaking his heart. He'd hoped this move would help. A new place. A project they could work on together. Something to build instead of something to mourn. John spent the first week doing the essential repairs. He fixed the plumbing, replaced the broken windows, and patched the holes in the roof where rain had been getting in. Helen helped where she could, handing him tools and holding the flashlight, while he worked in the crawl spaces and dark corners. At night, they slept on an air mattress in the living room, telling stories by candlelight because the electricity was still unreliable. Helen seemed a little lighter here. She smiled more, asked questions about what they'd fix next. It was progress, small but real. The envelope stayed in John's pocket, forgotten during the day, remembered only at night when he lay awake listening to the old house settle and creak around him. Open this only when you're ready. But ready for what? 3 weeks into living in the house, John started working on the second floor. Helen had chosen the bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with a window seat overlooking the backyard. It needed new drywall, fresh paint, and the closet door didn't close properly. John was measuring the closet frame when he noticed something odd. The closet was shallower than it should be. He knocked on the back wall and heard a hollow echo. A false wall. His curiosity sparked. He'd found hidden spaces in old houses before, usually containing nothing more than forgotten insulation or the occasional dead mouse. But something about this felt different. John carefully pried away the back panel of the closet, and behind it, he found a small room, no bigger than a walk-in pantry, but definitely intentional. Someone had built this space to be hidden, and it wasn't empty. There was a wooden chair in the center of the room, a small table beside it, and on the walls, dozens of photographs. Some were old, black and white, their edges curled with age. Others were more recent, in color but faded from time. John stepped inside, his heartbeat quickening. The photographs showed a family, a young couple, smiling, a baby in a blue blanket. The same baby, growing into a toddler, a child, a teenager. The photos were arranged chronologically, creating a visual timeline of a life. But there was something heartbreaking about them. In the early photos, the family looked happy. The couple held their son with such obvious love. But as the photos progressed, something changed. The smiles became strained. The boy's eyes grew distant. And then, around what looked like age 16, the boy disappeared from the photos entirely. The last few pictures showed only the couple, much older now, sitting in this very house. In their eyes was a sadness so deep it was almost physical. John's hands trembled as he looked through them. This was Arthur's house. These were Arthur's photos. This was Arthur's son. But where had the son gone? On the table, John found a journal, leather-bound and worn, filled with Arthur's handwriting. He knew he shouldn't read it. These were private thoughts, private grief. But he couldn't stop himself. The first entry was dated 30 years ago. Benjamin left today. Told us he never wanted to see us again. Said we were suffocating him, controlling him, ruining his life. Maybe he's right. Maybe we held on too tight. I only wanted to keep him safe. But try to protect him from the world. I pushed him into it, angry and alone. Margaret is crying in the bedroom. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if it can be fixed. John's throat tightened. He kept reading. Years of entries followed. Arthur writing about his regret, his hope that Benjamin would come home, his failed attempts to reach out. Margaret, Arthur's wife, had died 10 years ago. After that, the entries became shorter, sadder. I kept this room exactly as it was the day he left. His photos, his timeline, everything I wanted to say to him, but never could. I thought if I preserved it all, maybe one day he'd come back and see how much he was loved, how much he was missed. But he never came back. And now I'm too old, too tired. This house holds everything I couldn't say out loud. The final entry was dated just 2 weeks before John bought the house. I'm leaving tomorrow. The house is sold to a young man, a father with a daughter. He looked so tired, so heavy with something. I saw myself in him. I want to tell him everything. But how do you explain 3 decades of regret to a stranger? Instead, I gave him an envelope. Maybe he'll understand what I couldn't say. Maybe he'll do better than I did. The house will have a second chance, even if I never got one. John closed the journal, his eyes burning with unshed tears. He thought of Helen downstairs, probably playing with her rabbit, waiting for him to finish working. He thought of how, since Sarah died, he'd been so focused on just surviving each day that he'd forgotten to really see his daughter, to ask her how she was feeling, to let her talk about her mother without changing the subject because it hurt too much. He'd been so afraid of his own grief that he'd been building walls between them without even realizing it, just like Arthur had done with Benjamin. John's hand moved his pocket, and he pulled out the envelope. The wax seal cracked easily under his thumb. Inside was a single piece of paper, and on it, Arthur had written just a few lines in shaky handwriting. Dear friend, if you're reading this, you've found my hidden room. You've seen my failure. I spent 30 years preserving the past instead of fixing the present. I never learned the lesson until it was too late. Houses can be rebuilt, but relationships need constant care. Don't make my mistake. The people we love aren't projects to finish someday. They're gardens that need tending every single day. Water them with attention. Give them sunlight through your presence. Pull the weeds of resentment before they take root. I don't know what pain brought you to this house, but I know pain when I see it. I saw it in your eyes. Whatever you're running from or rebuilding after, don't forget the most important thing. The people still here, still loving you, still needing you. Fix the house, but fix your heart first. This house kept my secrets and held my regrets. I hope it gives you something better, a second chance to get it right, with hope for your future. Arthur Brennan, P.S. In the hidden room, behind the photographs on the east wall, there's a loose board. Behind it, you'll find something that might help with repairs. Consider it a gift from an old man who wishes he'd invested more in people and less in pride. John's tears fell freely now. He carefully moved the photographs on the east wall and found the loose board exactly where Arthur said it would be. Behind it was an envelope thick with cash, at least $5,000, and a note that said simply, for the house and for her. That evening, John didn't do any more repairs. Instead, he came downstairs and found Helen sitting on the floor of her unfinished room, drawing pictures of what she wanted her room to look like when it was done. Helen, John said softly, sitting down beside her, "Can we talk?" She looked up, surprised. They hadn't really talked, not about anything important, since Sarah's funeral. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly. "No, sweetheart, not at all." John took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you happy? Here, in this house. With me?" Helen's small face crumpled slightly. "Are you going to leave too?" The question hit John like a physical blow. "What? No. Helen, no. I'm never leaving you. Never." "Why would you think that?" "Because you're always sad," Helen whispered. "And you work all the time. And sometimes you look at me like it hurts. Like I remind you of Mommy, and that makes you sad. I try to be quiet and good so you won't be more sad, but I don't think it's working." John's heart shattered. He pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight while she finally cried. Really cried, for the first time since Sarah died. "I'm so sorry," John whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry. You're right. I have been sad. But not because of you. Never because of you. You're the only thing that's kept me going. And yes, you remind me of Mommy, but in the most beautiful way. You have her smile, her kindness, her brave heart. I miss her," Helen sobbed. "I miss her too, so much. And I thought if I just kept working, kept fixing things, kept moving forward, maybe it would hurt less. But I was wrong. We should have been missing her together, talking about her, remembering her. I shut you out because I was scared of my own pain, and that was wrong. You deserve better." They sat there on the floor of the unfinished room, holding each other, finally letting themselves feel everything they'd been holding back for 2 years. After a while, Helen pulled back and looked at her father with red-rimmed eyes. "Can we talk about Mommy sometimes? I'm scared I'm going to forget her voice." "We can talk about her whenever you want," John promised. "And I have videos on my phone. We can watch them together. Listen to her voice. Remember her laugh. All of it. We don't have to be scared of the memories, sweetheart. They're gifts. They're proof she was here and that she loved us." Helen nodded, wiping her eyes. "Daddy, yeah. Can we finish my room together? Not just you working while I watch, but together?" John smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in longer than he could remember. "I would love that." Over the next 3 months, everything changed. John and Helen worked on the house together, but it stopped being just about repairs. It became about conversation, about connection, about building something together that was theirs. They painted Helen's room her favorite color, a soft lavender that looked purple in some light and blue. In others, they hung curtains with stars on them. They built bookshelves together, with Helen measuring and John cutting, both of them laughing when measurements were slightly off and they had to improvise. They talked about Sarah while they worked. Helen shared memories John had never heard, little moments between mother and daughter that he'd missed while he was at work. John shared stories about falling in love with Sarah, about the day Helen was born, about all the ways Sarah had made their lives brighter. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed into something they could carry together instead of something that isolated them. John used Arthur's money carefully. He fixed the porch so it was safe and stable. He restored the carved banister on the staircase, carefully sanding and refinishing each vine and flower. He repaired the marble fireplace and got the chimney cleaned so they could have fires on cold evenings. But he never filled in the hidden room. Instead, he and Helen turned it into something new. They took down most of Arthur's photos. John kept a few and mailed them to an address he found in Arthur's journal, hoping that maybe, somehow, they'd reach Benjamin. In place of photographs, they hung their own memories, pictures of Sarah, pictures of the three of them, pictures of John and Helen working on the house, covered in paint and sawdust, smiling. They brought in comfortable cushions and warm blankets. They added a small bookshelf filled with Helen's favorite stories and a lamp that cast a warm, golden glow. It became their special place, their room for remembering and healing and being together. John put Arthur's letter in a frame and hung it on the wall of the hidden room. Fix the house, but fix your heart first. 6 months after moving in, the house was transformed. It stood straight and proud now, painted a warm cream color with dark green shutters. The porch no longer sagged. The windows gleamed. Flowers grew in the beds Helen had helped plant. But the real transformation was inside. John had learned to stop working every evening to have dinner with Helen. They cooked together, made messes together, laughed together. He'd started reading to her every night before bed, letting her pick the stories, taking his time instead of rushing through, because he had more work to do. He'd joined a grief support group and started processing his loss in healthier ways. He'd even started dating again, tentatively, carefully, but with Helen's blessing. She'd told him, with Sarah's wisdom in her voice, "Mommy would want you to be happy, Daddy. It's okay to love again. You have a big enough heart." For all of us, the house had given them space to heal. But more than that, Arthur's letter had given John permission to prioritize what mattered most. One afternoon, John was working the front yard when a car pulled up. An older man stepped out, maybe in his late 50s, with Arthur's eyes and a nervous expression. "Hi," the man said. I'm Benjamin Brennan. I got your letter. And some photos. Is this really my father's house?" John's heart raced. "Yes, I bought it from him about 6 months ago. Please, come in." They sat on the porch John had rebuilt with his own hands, and talked for hours. Benjamin explained that he cut off his parents in anger decades ago, too proud and too hurt to reach out even as years passed. By the time he'd finally been ready to reconcile, his mother had died, and he couldn't find his father. "I tried calling the house, but the number was disconnected," Benjamin said, his voice thick with regret. "I thought maybe he'd moved, but I didn't know where. I hired someone to look, but they couldn't find him. And then your letter arrived with those photos and the address, and—" He stopped, wiping his eyes. "Your father left you something," John said quietly. "Come with me." He led Benjamin through the house, past the restored banister Arthur had once touched every day, past the fireplace where Arthur had sat alone for years, up the stairs to the hidden room. Benjamin stood in the doorway, staring at the timeline of his life that his father had preserved, at the journal sitting on the table, at the evidence of decades of love and regret and hope. "He never stopped loving you," John said. He never stopped hoping you'd come home. Benjamin broke down then, crying for the father he'd pushed away and the years they'd lost. John gave him privacy, closing the door softly and going downstairs to find Helen. Benjamin stayed for 2 hours, reading his father's journal, sitting in the chair where Arthur had sat, finally understanding the depth of what he'd thrown away in anger so many years ago. Before he left, he found John in the kitchen. "Where is he now?" Benjamin asked. "My father. I need to see him." John had been dreading this question. He's at Meadowbrook Senior Living, about 20 miles north. But Benjamin, he has advanced dementia. Some days he's lucid. Most days he's not. I don't know if he'll recognize you. Benjamin's face fell, but there was determination there too. "I have to try. Even if he doesn't know me, I need to tell him I'm sorry. I need to tell him I love him, even if it's too late." "It's not too late," John said firmly. "Love doesn't expire just because the person can't respond the way we want them to. He'll feel it. Some part of him will know." Benjamin nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for finding me, for taking care of his house, for giving me this chance." After Benjamin left, Helen came into the kitchen. Was that the old man's son? "Yes. Is he going to be okay?" John knelt down to his daughter's level. "I think so. Eventually, he's learning the same lesson we learned, that the people we love matter more than our pride, more than our pain, more than anything else." Helen hugged him tight. "I'm glad we learned it while we still have each other." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." A month later, John received a letter from Benjamin. "Dear John, I visited my father every day after leaving your house. You were right. Most days he didn't know me, but on the 5th visit, he looked at me and said, 'Benjamin, is that you? Did you come home?' We had 45 minutes. Just 45 minutes of clarity where he knew who I was and we could talk. I told him everything I needed to say. He told me he forgave me years ago. We both cried. We held hands. He told me he was proud of me and that he'd always loved me. Then the fog came back and he forgot again. But I have those 45 minutes. I have that gift, and I'll visit him until the end, whether he knows me or not. Because you were right. He'll feel the love even if he can't name it. Thank you for buying his house. Thank you for honoring his pain by not letting it be for nothing. You learned the lesson he wanted to teach, and in doing so, you gave me the chance to learn it too. The house found the right family. I know it did. With gratitude, Benjamin P.S. My father had a saying when I was young, something I'd forgotten until reading his journal. We build houses to shelter our bodies, but we build families to shelter our souls. I finally understand what he meant. John read the letter aloud to Helen that night in their hidden room. Their remembering room, their healing room, their room for the family they were rebuilding together. "That's beautiful," Helen said softly. "We sheltered each other, didn't we?" "We did," John agreed, "and we always will." He looked around the room, at the photos of Sarah smiling down at them, at the pictures of him and Helen covered in paint and sawdust, at Arthur's framed letter on the wall. The house had needed rebuilding. The roof, the walls, the foundation. But John had needed rebuilding, too. His heart, his hope, his ability to be present for the daughter who needed him. Arthur had understood that, had known that fixing the structure wouldn't matter if the people inside remained broken. Fix the house, but fix your heart first. It was the most valuable thing the old man could have left him, not the money behind the wall, not the beautiful bones of the Victorian, but the wisdom to understand that the real work was never about the building. It was always about the love you fill it with. 2 years later, on a sunny Saturday morning, John stood in that same driveway where he'd first arrived, looking at the house he'd brought back to life. Helen was 10 now, tall and confident, helping him load tools into the truck. They were heading to another property, another fixer-upper. But this time, it wasn't about desperation or escape. It was about purpose. John had started a small business, buying old, abandoned houses and restoring them, then selling them to families who needed a fresh start. Single parents, people starting over, people like he'd been. And with each house, he left something behind. A letter, much like Arthur's. A reminder that buildings can be repaired, but relationships need daily care. That the work of healing is harder and more important than the work of construction. That second chances are precious and shouldn't be wasted. Helen had helped him write the letters. She'd added her own wisdom, earned through loss and healing. Talk to the people you love while you can. Don't wait. Tomorrow isn't promised, but today is a gift. They'd heard back from several families. Stories of reconciliation, of time spent together, of lessons learned. One man wrote that John's letter had prompted him to call his estranged daughter for the first time in 5 years. They were slowly rebuilding their relationship. Another woman wrote that the letter had reminded her to slow down, to put away her phone during dinner, to really listen when her children talked. Small changes, quiet transformations, ripples spreading outward from Arthur's wisdom through John's life into the lives of strangers who needed to hear it. As John and Helen drove away from their house, their home, their sanctuary, their proof that broken, things could be made beautiful again, Helen asked, "Dad, do you think the old man knows?" "Mr. Arthur, do. You think he knows what his letter did?" John thought about Benjamin's visits to his father, about the 45 minutes of clarity, about all the love that had finally found its way home. "I think somehow he knows," John said, "and I think he'd be happy." "What do you think Mommy would think about all of this?" John smiled, his heart full instead of heavy. "I think she'd be proud of us. I think she'd love that we turned our pain into something that helps others, that we learned to carry her with us instead of running from the memories." "I talk to her sometimes," Helen admitted quietly. "Is that weird?" "Not at all. I do, too." "What do you tell her?" "That we're okay, that we're happy, that we miss her every day, but we're building a good life, the kind of life she'd want for us. A life full of love and purpose and second chances." Helen nodded, satisfied. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only exists between people who weathered storms together and come out stronger on the other side. "Dad," Helen said eventually. "Yes, sweetheart. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Maybe not with houses, but in some way, I want to do what you do. Take broken things and make them better." John's eyes burned with happy tears. "You already do, Helen. You already do." That night, in their hidden room back home, John added one more photo to the wall. It was from that morning, Helen laughing while covered in sawdust, her arms spread wide, standing in front of the Victorian that saved them both. Beneath it, he wrote, "We sheltered each other." The house held their story now, just as it had held Arthur's, just as it would hold the stories of whoever came after them, years or decades in the future, because that's what homes do. They witness our pain and our healing. They stand firm while we fall apart and rebuild ourselves. They're the constant background to our most important transformations. John had bought this house thinking it was just wood and nails, a roof and walls, a project to distract him from his grief. But Arthur had known better, had known that the right house at the right time for the right person could be so much more. It could be a second chance. It could be a place to remember without being consumed by the past. It could be where a broken father and his lonely daughter learned to shelter each other's souls. John turned off the light in the hidden room and headed downstairs, where Helen was waiting with a book they were reading together. As he settled onto the couch beside his daughter, her head resting on his shoulder, he silently thanked the old man who'd sold him this house. "Thank you for the walls and the roof, but mostly for the wisdom. Thank you for being brave enough to share your regret, so I could avoid my own. Thank you for understanding that the most valuable thing you could leave behind wasn't the house itself, but the lesson it took you a lifetime to learn. Fix the house, but fix your heart first." John had fixed both. And in doing so, he'd given his daughter something more valuable than any inheritance. A father who was present, available, and whole. A father who understood that time with the people you love isn't something to get to eventually. It's something to prioritize now, today, this moment. Because moments are all we ever really have. And the people we love are all that truly matter. Everything else is just wood and nails. So here's my question for you. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Are you in a home you're building? A place you're fixing, or maybe a space you're trying to make your own? And more importantly, did this story make you feel something? Did it remind you of someone you need to call, someone you need to forgive, or maybe someone you need to simply spend more time with? What lesson are you taking from John and Helen's story? From Arthur's regret and Benjamin's second chance? Leave me a comment below. Tell me your story. Share where you're watching from and what spoke to you. Because every single comment reminds me why I create these stories, to connect us, to heal, something, to remind us what matters. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the people you love or the time you have with them, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because we have more stories to tell, more broken places that need healing, more fathers, mothers, and families finding their way back to what matters most. These stories are for you, for me, for all of us trying to build something beautiful out of something broken. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, fix your heart first. Everything else can wait. Until next time, take care of the ones you love. They're the only foundation that truly matters.